Hey guys, and welcome to Star Technology Progression Log 5. Man, I have got a lot to show you guys this week. Like I said last week, I had finished my first book, so I was taking a pretty long break. So I've been playing nothing but Minecraft for pretty much a whole week, and change. So like we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll start off with the obvious thing, is I now have chain conveyors everywhere. I do have access to things like travel anchors if I want to get around the base. They're really not that expensive. They're actually pretty frickin' cheap, just a bunch of steel, which we have, as well as an enderpearl. But chain conveyors are really, really cool. And here's what they do. You can use any wrench, so right now I'm just using the create wrench, and they just go in the direction you're looking at. So I'm in like F5 mode, so it's a little bit weird to aim. But you just kind of like point in the general direction, and you just go that way, and you can cycle off of it, and you hop back off. It actually works with things like GT wrenches, and then we can go this way. It also works with the laser wrench. Anything that counts as a wrench lets you just hook onto a chain and you can just follow it all the way around, and it's so much fun. It's obviously infinitely slower than the travel anchors, which are instant and ridiculous range. But it's so cool. I can't not use it. I love it. That's all it ever gets used for is travel. I'm not using it to like move stress units around the base or anything from a create or whatever. It's legitimately just as the coolest form of travel possible. So I guess since we're over here, we'll start right here. I've ripped out pretty much all the ore processing that was over here that is getting moved and is in a much better state elsewhere than it ever was over here. So we have lots of things that have been removed over here. There are still some things that I actually need to push. I forgot about these few drawers and stuff. I need to go grab these and put them over there. Um, the rest of the ore procs is all gone over here. I did remove pretty much all of the chemical. I removed all of the chemical reactors and all of the machines over here. This whole island was basically tore out to bare bones. Everything except the the blast furnaces, which I left. I actually need to feed these things more iron. I've just been. Oh, are you like full up on iron? No. Are you out of charcoal? No, I remember I actually pulled these things out so I could move them. Um, so basically the idea is I have LCRs now. I set up PTFE for on demand, which is super cursed. I'm well aware. I've actually have almost no passive chemical lines for most of this run so far. I had sulfuric acid and polyethylene for a little while, but other than that, everything else has been um, completely on demand, and it's super cursed, and I want to stop doing that. So I need to build out a bunch of LCRs and stuff, this is where they were gonna go anyway. They were always gonna go on this warehouse building thing, but I had just never built them before, and now I can. One other thing is, I think each one of these things, these lines, is gonna be a subnet. It is going to take a lot of devices to run these things the way I'm used to, and I'm trying to be smart about how many channels I push from mainnet to everywhere else. And like I said, it would be a lot of channels. Like just to run these two as 6 channels, it would go down to a little bit less, I believe. If we have once we have the ME input hatches and stuff, or once we have like dual input as well, that would be nice. Um, but that's not for L to LUV, unfortunately. Come over here. It's LUV with PBI, Ruridit, niobium, titanium, all the input stuffs. So, um, that or the output hatches or the ME stuff as well. So, there's still gonna be lots of devices over here, and even once I start upgrading stuff, that the number of devices won't really change too much. Uh, like that's still only 2 tanks, so you really need ZPM for something that's any good for some of those larger recipes anyway. So, yeah, basically the idea is this will be a subnet. It can see everything mainnet can, and mainnet can see everything on here. They're extract only on both sides down here. Or actually, sorry, they're bidirectional on both sides. This is so if, like, from auto crafting, if I cancel a craft, it can put the chemicals back in here, for example. But it's all been whitelisted and stuff, and so it makes sure it doesn't dump anything that it shouldn't. Never put on my storage solution is never put unfiltered fluid drives on mainnet. Fluid storage will always be whitelisted when it comes to using AE storage for fluids. So. We got that. We do have sulfuric acid over here. Sulfuric acid has a much better recipe as soon as you get LCRs. When you make it in, hello, chemical reactors. So, here, actually, I'll just search up sulfuric acid specifically. Making sulfuric acid has a couple of different recipes. So first, you're forced into just the regular chemical reactor recipe, which requires you to make it from sulfur trioxide and water, which comes from sulfur dioxide and oxygen, which comes from sulfur and oxygen. So it requires multiple machines and it's very slow. Um, but you can, however, with the advent of LCRs, just make it from sulfur and water in one step. So this is what we're doing now, right here. This is running on a threshold level emitter to keep sulfuric acid between 4 and 5,000 buckets. So because I don't want to fill up that whole drive. Because if we come over here and take a look, this drive is being used for multiple different things. It's used for silicone rubber, which I actually might not make anymore on passive, PVC, which I definitely will, and I believe that's ethylene. I forget. We can take a look because I think I might need to make a. Oh, it's vinyl chloride. That's what it is. Uh, so yeah, we have. I was originally going to put hydrochloric acid on this drive, but I want to actually have hydrochloric acid on its own drive because it's a byproduct in a bunch of other recipes. So that's going to get an overflow destruction card. I'm also going to set up like a thresholded recycler that will recycle extra hydrochloric acid back into hydrogen chlorine. Um, but if that eventually blocks up, which it very well might at some point, hydrogen and chlorine at a certain point really aren't all that valuable. That'll all just get voided and it'll be fine. So, um, lots of one thing about silicone rubber is you need it for one of the SMD components, capacitors, I believe. Uh, I believe you don't need to make it with silicone rubber at a certain point. I believe it's SMD capacitors. Yes, so we can actually make this with PVC. And the reason why I'm thinking about not setting up silicone rubber on demand is we'll actually go ahead and take a look at the second section over here. This over here is some distillation stuff. We're doing a bunch of distilling over here. Um, Not only are we doing liquid air distillation, but I'm also doing fermented biomass distillation. We're doing charcoal byproducts distillation, which means we're also doing wood vinegar distillation. Like right here, this is wood gas, wood tar. This is where we actually distill the charcoal byproducts into the various different gases and stuff. This is so we get lots of different, very useful different chemicals. We get things like methane is the big thing from all of this stuff. Creosote, which is also one of the reasons I set up charcoal byproducts for. Um, it also gives us phenol and toluene, acetic acid, lots and lots of good things that we'll use all over the place. Ethylene, little extra methane from wood vinegar or wood gas. Um, so this area over here is used for, we have a vacuum freezer making liquid air. We have one pyrolyze oven making fermented biomass. We have two more making charcoal byproducts. This thing hasn't been running in a while, I guess, because I don't actually have biochaff anywhere on passive anymore. We're not making biochaff anymore. That is something where I need to put it. It might go over here. This is sort of where I've been putting support equipment for. Um, when it comes to like distillation stuff, and we don't really use biochaff anywhere else, I believe. It really is only ever going to get used over here, so it might be fine to put over here. Oh, I guess you actually do need it for bacteria. So this might have to go somewhere else then, just so it's accessible to mainnet. Though I could always just, make it available to mainnet from the subnet. It's not like it's impossible. Anyway, so what one of the reasons why I might not do silicone rubber is if we take a look at what the next tier of rubber, which is styrene butadiene rubber. This takes sulfur and raw styrene butadiene dust. We have sulfur. Raw styrene butadiene dust takes oxygen, styrene, and butadiene. And styrene is just ethylene and benzene. Both of which of these things we have ethylene and benzene. Ethylene comes from we're making a little bit of it from, I believe, where do you come from? Wood gas. We get a little bit of ethylene from wood gas, and I believe that's it. I don't believe we have it anywhere else. No, we don't. So we have a little bit of ethylene from wood gas, and we'll also get more of it from, petrochem once we get to that. And then we have benzene from what's it, wood tar? Yes, wood tar. We get benzene from wood tar. And we'll also get more of that stuff from petrochem. So basically, when it comes to styrene butadiene rubber, the only thing I need to do is we need butadiene, which also comes from petrochem. So effectively, as soon as I set up petrochem, we have styrene butadiene rubber. Like this is just made oh, it's benzene, sorry. Like this is HV, this is LV, so like this is like totally doable for us. Styrene's LV. So I am struggling to figure out why I would want to put silicone rubber on passive when I'm really close to setting up the next tier of rubber on passive, and I can still on-demand silicone rubber. I'm still on-demanding liquid rubber. I have both liquid rubber, silicone rubber, PVC, and PTFE all on demand. So I probably won't put silicone rubber on passive. I'll probably just wait and end up putting SBI, or I guess SBR, on passive instead as soon as I set up petrochem, which is one of the next things I do have to do. But there are a million and one different things I have to do. But right now, we don't really need styrene. We don't really need SBR. It's not really required for progression at this stage of where we are, which means that I can wait. But it doesn't mean that I'm just not going to put silicone rubber on passive. I'll just continue on demanding it. My passive infrastructure is absolutely fucking atrocious. Almost everything is on demanded in this base, which isn't really something I want to do a whole lot, but it is what it is for right now. Actually, over here I do want to mention is I filled out a bunch of the magnets and I started replacing some with neodymium. I started making a bunch of neodymium ingots. So I'm starting to slowly fill out this powerhouse a little bit more. We still have some more stress units available on this side over here, and the other side doesn't have any neodymium magnets. So one thing as well is even though I have all these lasers over here, I don't actually use them anymore because we now have flux points. Uh, we did unlock EV. I unlocked well, we have HV energy hatches technically. So once we unlocked LCRs, once we had because flux dust is made in an LCR EV with lava and redstone, so it's really not that expensive at all. It's pretty freaking cheap. Um, so all we really needed was HV energy hatches, and I've just finally got around to doing it over the last week. Was just setting up an LCR on demand. So we have Flux networks now. There are still plenty of things throughout the base that do use the lasers. I've only been replacing them as I've found them or needed to change things or added new things. So I guess I'll actually go over here next. Um, the one passive chemical, or the two passive chemicals I have or I guess, the two passive chemicals I have are, like I mentioned, sulfuric acid, as well as titanium tetrachloride, which gets used in making titanium ingots. And we have two EVFs over here. This is the EVF passive area. Right now I have just two vacuum freezers at HV. They're using a tag storage bus here to just gobble up all the hot ingots, 20,000 prio, so they always go here first. I'm just storing ingots on the mainnet storage. I was thinking about like when I played Monty Factory and what putting every single EVF on a subnet got me. And the answer is it didn't really get me anything except really complex AE infrastructure. And don't get me wrong, it was super cool and stuff. And it also meant that, I guess like the hot ingots were constrained to a single subnet, so if we saw overflow, it didn't overflow into the main drives. I did have that problem in ATM 9 actually, but I don't really feel like that was a problem that was worth solving in that sense. Like I don't know. It didn't really feel like it was worth it to me, and I just really wanted to get some vacuum freezers for the passive EBFs. Um, So I didn't really feel like setting up some more ultra complex, uh, AE architecture. And I have the channels to spare over here. We didn't really use all that many for the clean room over here, and we probably really won't in the end. And also, I can always add more controllers, and channels really aren't an issue in of themselves in the sense that I want to make sure I use almost nothing at all. It's mostly just an issue in the sense is that if I'm spamming a shitload of channels in a small area, I might want to put that onto subnet. And with how there really aren't that many channels over here, I mean, there's like 2 down here, and there'll be, I don't know, like 3 up here, or 4 up here per 2 or whatever. It really depends. So there's really not all that many channels up here. Um, so if it does become a problem later on, I suppose I could rework the AE in this area, but for now it's not really an issue, and I think the issue that I was having a problem with, like maybe hot ingots filling up main drives by accident, can be solved just by making sure my vacuum freezer infrastructure is not terrible, and just keeping an eye on that. And I'm going to use this whole block here for vacuum freezers. It was kind of made worse by the fact that I didn't have very many spots for vacuum freezers in Monty Factory and ATM9, so I can always just add way more vacuum freezers. Like this can all just be a huge line of vacuum freezers for hot ingots, and then maybe this can be vacuum freezers to make like liquid helium or whatever, or the various coolants that I'll need. And there we go, it's turning on. I did one thing is I also set up an EBF for passive silicon ingots, because silicon is made in 2 different ways in an EBF. There's a good way and a bad way. And the good way uses silicon dioxide and carbon dust and makes some byproducts and stuff. And the bad way, and this also takes like 12 seconds, by the way. And the bad way just uses pure silicon dust, but this takes over a minute by base. The reason why I'm not using silicon dioxide dust is I don't have silicon dioxide dust on passive anymore. At least not right now. I don't have flint dust on passive. Like I pulled out a ton of passive infrastructure and I never put it back, and I have no idea where I want to put. I just need like a warehouse for just random garbage that I just want to like put down somewhere. Rather than areas where I'm going to be focusing on putting like one machine. So I do need to build like a random garbage platform, which has sort of been the old like on where I was making building blocks. That's kind of turned a little bit into the random garbage platform. Like some of that stuff just might go there, but I'm not really happy about that. I do want to just have a dedicated platform for random garbage. Uh, so we're doing it this way just because it makes the passive infrastructure easier, as well. Since it is passive, it doesn't really matter all that much that it's slow. I set this up last night, and we have obviously 1100 ingots since I went to bed, which is nice. So this will keep it between 5,000 to 6,000. It's kind of high just because it's really slow per ingot. Eventually, this will get faster and faster, obviously, as I add more HV or add more energy hatches, or because I'm only giving this thing 1 energy hatch. I could give it 2. It's not like the energy hatches are expensive. I just didn't because I didn't really feel like there was a reason to throw another 2 amps of HV at this, since I don't really use all that many silicon ingots, honestly. So, um, this is fine the way it is. So, I guess we'll go ahead and move on. Was the clean room here last time? I think it was. I don't remember, but this is the clean room. I do need to upgrade this cutter to an EV cutter, but that requires, like if I want to make an EV cutter, did I have that on demand? I did not on demand that, but the EV cutter requires an ultimate cutting saw. Come here. It requires an ultimate buzzsaw blade, which does require molybdenum, which I don't know if the ore processing system has. Yes, we do have molybdenum dust now. Nice. I set that up last night to process some of that stuff, and it did. So we actually can go ahead and make that at some point. I guess we'll take a look at the random garbage island first, since that's closer, as well as the on-demand stuff. I love these chain conveyors, by the way. They're so stylish. Over here, I didn't really made too many changes, besides I added a passive obsidian finally. This really wasn't that expensive. It's just 1 redstone that doesn't get consumed in an HV rock crusher. And boom, infinite obsidian. I have a few more spaces over here. I was thinking about doing passive glass, and I still might do that, but I just was doing other things. It's not really that big of an issue to order it. Over here, we're making distilled water. I finally moved it and added way, way more. We have 12 distillers here making distilled water. We use it all over the base, and we'll be using it all over in ore processing. We're making lubricant over here. Apparently, this locked up, which is unfortunate. I'm going to have to fix that. I'll have to deal with that. These lasers were being really sketchy when I was trying to set all this stuff up. Sometimes they weren't working, and I couldn't figure out why. I had to keep breaking them and replacing them, and eventually they started working again. So I guess they stopped working. But yeah, so we're making distilled water and lubricant over here. I might add, biochaff and plant balls over here. I don't know. This is because we use this stuff over in the ore processing. But before we get to ore processing, I would like to talk about the on-demand sections. The on-demand section has seen some improvements. First off, we have 2 EBFs now instead of 1. I also moved the 1 EBF I had over 1 block, so it actually was in the center of this little section over here instead of off by 1. It really annoyed me. The coils are also up to nichrome, and I added more pattern providers. One thing I had a wall was I ran out of space for patterns. Even though I was using the extended ones, which have 2 rows, but I still ran out of. These gotta all be in blocking. Thank you. I don't think blocking really matters because of how I set it up, though. Um, but, so I ran out of patterns and I needed to set up new coils anyway, so I was like, okay, I'll just tear it all down and fix it. So I have plenty of space over here, which is nice. I do actually have access to the extended pattern providers now, which have 4 rows and can do more than just processing patterns, because the enlarged pattern providers have 2 rows instead of 1, but they can only do processing recipes. So you can't use them for like molecular assemblers, for example. Um, But the extended pattern providers, which are an upgrade from the enlarged, require EV, which, if we take a look over here, like I mentioned, I think I mentioned it, um, I do have the single block assembler. Um, I'm pretty sure I just mentioned this. Uh, you know what? I actually didn't. I've attempted to re-record this section multiple times, and I had my mic muted. So I think I forgot to mention it. Um, we do have a single block EV assembler now. It's not in any particular circuit, just because I don't want to build a shitload of these things. So this got us access to the various EV input hatches, so I can upgrade ore processing better, and we have access to the extended ME components. This means I can actually swap out a bunch of these enlarged pattern providers for the extended ones, which have 4 rows. I just haven't gotten around to that yet. Eventually I will. It's just all very time consuming, and it all works for now. And I have other bigger concerns than fixing a system that already works. These multi-blocks have perfect overclock, like I mentioned. So they're pretty fast. They're really fast. And I also can do like what I did here, which I use like little mini subnets with a bunch of individual extended pattern providers to dump into interfaces, which then store in the ME input buses. So this allows me to have lots and lots of patterns in single machines, and these machines are so powerful that I can run like a bajillion patterns off them. So the cabling down here is a little bit spaghetti, and I'm not really happy about how spaghetti it is. But it is what it is. Maybe eventually I'll come down here and neaten it up, but for now it's like, again, it's fine. On demand is in a really weak state, which is really disappointing considering how this base relies on demand stuff. Our infrastructure as a whole, when it comes to crafting, is really quite abysmal. Our infrastructure when it comes to power, and I guess now's the time, resource production, is not. It's really strong. We have some really strong resource production infrastructure. Um, I put the tree farm back. I finally got around to building that again, and it's actually bigger than it was before. I think it's larger and wide. It's just larger in every dimension, I believe. It also constantly works. It doesn't break like it used to. Um, I fixed this or made it better by just using a timer. So rather than trying to like continue moving in the next direction after it hits the redstone contact on the other end, so it constantly keeps going back and forth, I just set it on a 3-minute timer. So it just goes in one direction, waits 3 minutes, goes back, just does it every 3 minutes. It's not really a problem. I don't really think you were losing any efficiency gains by like letting it grow for too long, because there's so many trees that 3 minutes of growth is fine rather than like going back and forth for 10 seconds of growth or whatever. So I'm not really all that concerned about it, and it's obviously really powerful because we have 2.4 million logs, and that is on top of the distillation towers that like the charcoal byproducts that we're making. So which does consume, I believe it consumes about 2 logs a second. So this is a really powerful tree farm, and it requires only a little bit of power, just enough to run this motor over here. So it costs 103 RF per tick. I assume Lightning Bolt is RF. Yeah, it is. Okay, if you can see in the it's not Whaley, it's Jade now. Up top, it's 103 RF, so it's like 25, little more than like 25 EU a tick. So not even 1 amp LUV for lots and lots of logs. So absolutely fantastic over here. Really happy with this. We also get things like sticks, which is nice, as well as saplings, which is that's what we use for. That's what we will use, I should say, for chaff, biochaff once I actually start that up again. I do actually use it for bone meal now as well, rather than beetroot seeds like I was using before. It's just more consistent that way because I was running out of beetroot seeds because I was using that for seed oil at the time. So now, I guess the crown piece of what I've been working on over the last week is ore production and ore processing. We'll start with the ore processing, I guess, because it's the most built out. Ore processing is basically what the infrastructure I built for Monty Factory was, except it's going to be larger in length mostly, as well as how many different rows I have. I have 9 rows, or I have 8 rows actually for now. I might extend this just because there's lots of things to do. Right now, one of these rows is doing double duty for both electrolyzing as well as sifting. I don't really think I'm going to need 40 bajillion electrolyzers, especially once I get access to the IV multi-blocks. Um, the IV multi-blocks or whatever will only get 1 per section, but that's still like 3 of them over here. And I only think I ever had 3 for Monty Factory. And we can always go parallel hatches, and if need be, I can always move this sifter. I won't really be all that concerned about moving the sifter. It might get moved over with the autoclave, honestly, because I don't really know how many autoclaves we're going to need. Um, it's also possible that I just, throw this in this direction and just add a few more rows, just so the sifter can get its own line. And if it really ended up needing that many, I don't really think so, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm not really concerned about it at this stage. But we have things like centrifuges, thermal centrifuges. We have the washers over here. This one is going to be for hydrochloric acid. I'm planning for this one to be EV, so this one will be for making tungsten, because tungsten is hydrochloric acid is used in the tungsten requires it's a little special, so it needs its own little special boy. So it needs its own little processing line, and it's really freaking annoying. Um, you have to electrolyze tungstic acid dust, which comes from washing scheelite dust or tungstate dust with hydrochloric acid. So it's just a little bit of an extra step, and this has to be done at EV, and you have to electrolyze it at EV as well. So that means I'm gonna have to take that electrolyzer up to EV, which won't really be a problem because I only have one. And having the electrolyzer at EV wouldn't really be a bad thing considering how many things we electrolyze in ore processing. Hint, it's a lot. We electrolyze a lot of things. So, um, but yeah, we have the macerator over here as well. Grumbling away. Let me go ahead and turn that off. Goodbye. That's annoying. Um, and then we have just the output drives over here. So we're very, very wealthy. I moved pretty much all of the results of the ore processing we've been doing on the old island where I had ripped it all up. It's all put over here now, and it's filled an absolute ton of drives. We have 3 full 64Ks of stuff. We're almost filled a fourth. And I have 5 empty ones. Or this one only has a little bit of stuff in it. Um, so, yeah, eventually I do want to move to bulk drives. I'm gonna need to move to bulk drives actually before I run ore production at, which is that section over there, at full capacity. I'll get to that when I get over there. But we have the macerators here, washing, thermal, centrifuge, sifter, electrolyzer, autoclaves, distillation towers, and the packers. One thing is I've actually been recycling the stone dust here for the autoclaves because the molten ore requires stone dust to actually produce. So the stone dust that we get from washing actually gets stored in the autoclave section on an overflow, a very small overflow drive, because I don't need to store tons and tons of the stone dust, and it's not really useful for all that much, if I'm being honest. Um, like, you can centrifuge stone dust for a tiny, tiny amount of extra resources, but it's just really not worth it. Like, the resources you get from it just really isn't all that great. I think the most valuable thing here is either probably the biotite dust or the metal mixture dust, but both of those things have really low chances, and on their own, the metal mixture dust really isn't all that valuable either. So you can centrifuge that stuff too, and that does give you some like okay stuff, I guess. I guess Ilmenite's nice, and then like Barite might be nice, but again, those are like really bad chances. You're better off just melting that stuff down back into molten ore mixture. Like, here's a really funny thing: molten ore mixture actually infinitely loops. If you didn't know this, so it takes 2 metal mixture dust to make 20 buckets of molten ore mixture. Well, you get for every 10 buckets of molten ore mixture you distill in a distillation tower, you get a metal mixture dust back. So molten ore mixture endlessly cycles if you just melt down all the metal mixture dust that you get from it, which is, I don't really know if I'm gonna do that in the end, just because it's kind of annoying to set this up, I think. Um, so I don't know. Also, this mixer would have to go on the autoclave line, or I'd have to have stone dust stored in multiple places, which would be annoying. Um, have it high priority in autoclave, maybe pull out the overflow destruction card or something like that. I don't know. Um, or maybe do high priority in the other one. There's questions I have to answer for that. But obviously this could be a use for stone dust. This would probably be the most useful form of stone dust and metal mixture, at least not counting autoclaving stone dust into the ores we need. So um, we have it also takes 48 buckets of lava and takes 30 seconds at IV, which is a lot of power. 4.6 million EU tick. So, but this is for much, much later. I'm not really concerned about this right now. Having more molten ore mixture would be really, really nice. I always figured we'd have enough from my first experiments with, hand batching the results of the void extractor. But I guess like now is a good enough time to go over and talk about it. It's actually really slow. I obviously I should have like intellectually known that because it's like the time on it was really bad, but I always figured that it was enough to like run a lot. Um, like if it was continuously running, I'd get a lot of stuff out of it. And the answer is really not. It's not. I mean, I'm only running it at MV. Uh, I'm not sure if I'm gonna run this at HV or just build a couple more and run them at MV. Um, I mean, we do get like a chance at a bunch of these ores and stuff, but we do get the raw ore slurry and raw ore residue. But you don't really get all that much of that stuff. So it turns out, hand processing ores like once every 3 days gives you a false sense of how fast something is. Um, who would have guessed, right? So this is much slower than I'd like it to be, but this is the ore production area, and we're going to have lots of things over here. So we're going to have 2 rows of void extractors, since that's where the most valuable resources come from. They come from void extractors. Down here, we're going to have the seawater. I'm going to make seawater down here, because seawater gets us a couple of things. It gets us, if we centrifuge it, rock saltpeter and rock salt, which we'll need. It gets us salt water, which we'll need as well. We can electrolyze that for sodium hydroxide, chlorine, and hydrogen if we want, or we can or centrifuge it for salt and water. I'll probably electrolyze it for the chlorine and sodium hydroxide, just because we'll get chlorine, or sorry, we'll get salt from processing rock salt. Uh, Rock salt gives you a chance at salt, which we'll do. So we're gonna, wash it, which will give us a chance at salt, and then we'll thermal it, which will give us borax, because we do want borax. So we're gonna go down the borax line for this. But we still do get a chance at salt, which is nice, but it's not like a huge, huge chance, but it is something. So we don't use too much salt. Its major use right now is mostly in just making, um, in the chemical reactor. Here it is. For making chemical dyes, which we use for lamps. But you don't really use all all that much of that stuff. It's like 1 salt per lamp or something like that is what it comes out to. So whatever we get will be enough, I'm sure. So we're gonna have 2 rows of void extractors. We're gonna have 2 rows of sieves, or actually, I think it's just 1 row. Yeah, we're gonna have 1 row of sieves. I had originally planned for 2, but from sieves, you don't really the resources you get from sieves aren't crazy valuable, and you do get a lot of them. Like if we go mechanical sieves, which I'm not sure I'm gonna do. I think I'm probably just gonna wait for the large sieves, just because. I'll talk. So the 64K drives are not large enough, as you guys saw. I'm spamming the hell out of them. they're mostly filled up by the very like the basic resources you get from civs, since that was what I was running for the longest, right? Um, the thing is though, like so those drives are filling up, and eventually we can make the bulk drives, which store an infinite amount of one resource of one item. Um, those are locked at IV though. They're gated to IV. Like if we look at like the bulk storage components, they're craftable and they require IV circuits, which we can actually make. The problem is the mega components themselves are gated to the IV ME assemblers, which we don't have yet. Um, the 256Ks are gated to EV, so we can actually make the 256Ks if we want. But good fucking lord, the 64s alone are slow as hell. Um, Again, this is just because the on-demand infrastructure I've got fucking sucks. I do just need to like sit down and pull a bunch of it out and rework it and upgrade a bunch of the stuff. Um, but I don't have power storage yet, so I can't really like surge higher than what I'm capable of producing at all times, which is really annoying. But the Lapatronic supercapacitor is gated to LUV, unfortunately. Oh, it's actually the substation. Sorry, I've been watching a lot of GTNH streams. The substation is gated to LUV, unfortunately. So we're not quite there yet. Once we get nano stuff, we can technically make it, but nano requires an EV circuit assembler, um, which will be not fun. Uh, right? I see. EV circuit assembler. So I guess we could make this soon. Oh, I need Quantumize. I was looking at this and I need radon gas, which is going to be obnoxious. I have to do uranite processing because there's the radon line where you recycle uranium and plutonium with air into radon gas. But I don't have plutonium yet. Plutonium 239 is kind of obnoxious to get. I think the only way we can actually make it is making the tiny piles from centrifuging uranium dust, but it's a 2% chance at HV. Uh, EV gets it to a 2.8% chance. Um, and that's it. There's like not any other way of making this. Like if we look at fission, I believe, or actually, maybe there is a way of making it from the fuel rods. Maybe it's low enriched. Okay, yes, we can actually make it from low enriched fuel rods. So this requires nuclear fission, though, which is not something we have yet. But that being said, nuclear fission is something I do want to do for power at some point. So at some point, this will happen. Unfortunately, this will require. I think the fission reactor is also gated to IV. Uh, Nuclear reactor, right? That's what it's called. Oh, no. High temperature smelting casing, HSA, titanium carbide, which I am distinctly lacking, unfortunately. This is EBFable. So this is something we can actually work towards too. This does require more nichrome coils though, and nichrome coils are slow as fuck. Um, but still, that's something doable. But more discussing ore production, since I kind of got sidetracked by a lot. We have sifters over here. We have 2 rows of sifters for now, at least. We're gonna have another row of cobbleworks. This will produce like dust, sand, gravel, and crushed blackstone that will be used in sieves. One thing is though, I'm not doing a full-on control network like I'm doing for ore processing, just because things won't need to be as dynamic as they are in ore processing. You know, I'll set a sieve to gravel and that's all it'll do, or I'll set a sieve to sand, or a sifter to do that recipe with sand or whatever, right? So I don't really need to do the full-on control schema like I did with ore production or ore processing. The few exceptions to that rule will be sifters and uh, the cutters, or I should say the sifters have a wide variety of outputs, and the cutters will have a wide variety of inputs because of that. So I kind of want those two things on subnets, but instead of them going through the main net here to as a control scheme to like pass things to different other methods of ore processing, they're just dumping like sifters are just dumping everything they've got into. They'll just dump Well, they'll dump all the geodes they get into the cutters, and then the cutters will just pull all the geodes that they have. So the sifters will both be input and output for themselves, and that stuff will just get stored, um, where it needs to go. Everything else is just going to get pretty much dumped into mainnet for storage, but mainnet here in ore processing is only storing two things right now. It's storing drilling fluid and it's storing stone dust. The void extractors require drilling fluid, and it's the only thing in the pack that uses drilling fluid that I'm aware of. I don't know of anything else that uses drilling fluid. Um, oh, actually, the miners and do the rigs use drilling fluid? No. The large miners would use drilling fluid, but we're not making those for obvious reasons. Um, and if I do need, like, if I do want to make a miner, I can just dump it over here, I guess, and I can just have it pull drilling fluid from this network. But the idea is that the only thing that would ever, want to use drilling fluid on a network is the void extractors. So there's no point in making it on mainnet. And so I need to recycle a little bit of stone dust because drilling fluid does need stone dust. But the nice thing is the cutters actually make stone dust when cutting geodes, which is why they're the ones that were set up after the void extractors. They were actually set up first. These things cut geodes into the raw ore and then the stone dust. The stone dust gets kept here so it can be recycled for drilling fluid as needed. Obviously, we avoid excess, but all of the ore production and fluid production, this is actually very ingenious. I feel very smart about this. Um, I use storage buses on P2Ps for both fluid and item P2Ps, and these P2Ps go directly into the ore processing area. The ore processing area just accepts the stuff that comes from ore production because there's no need for that to go through mainnet. Like there's only one place the stuff from ore production would go, and that is ore processing. So why run that through mainnet at all when I can just use a P2P and dump it straight into the ore processing mainnet and let it just get processed as it needs to? Um, so this works. I really like the way this works. This does get clogged up if I feed it like a new ore that hasn't been whitelisted somewhere, but eventually we'll whitelist everything, so that's only a temporary problem while it's growing. So I'm not really all that concerned about it. Um, but yeah, so I feel very happy about that. So all the raw ores, basically from the cutters as well as the void extractors, that includes the various fluids it pulls out. All of that stuff gets dumped into P2Ps, dumped into ore processing, and then processed as normal throughout, however it needs to get processed and stuff. So I'm very, very happy with this. Obviously, all this stuff is very, very, very bare bones. Ore processing or ore production is the bare minimum needed to actually run the void extractors because I need more ilmenite, or actually I need more rutile, and rutile comes from a couple of different places. It comes from blasting or EBFing ilmenite. This will get me rutile dust as well as wrought iron, but it does require a ton of ilmenite dust, and I don't really have all that much stuff. But it also just comes from general ore processing of aluminum ore, ilmenite ore, and bauxite ore, as well as electrolyzing bauxite dust. Unfortunately, we only really get traces of this stuff. It's really hard to get a lot of it, especially since how goddamn slow the void extractor is, because bauxite ore and aluminum ore need to be autoclaved. Like ilmenite. Oh crap, I keep misspelling it. So we have ilmenite ore, and then we'll have bauxite. Take a look at both of them. Both of these things require to be autoclaved from molten bauxite ore, and molten bauxite ore comes from a distillation tower from molten ore mixture. We don't really get all that much from it either. You get 1 bucket of ilmenite ore, and you get 1.5 buckets of bauxite. So that's 2 raw ore from ilmenite and 3 raw ore from molten bauxite. It's 500 millibuckets per raw ore item. Molten ore mixture comes from raw ore slurry, which we get 250 millibuckets from 1 bucket of raw ore slurry. And it costs 10 buckets worth of molten ore mixture before we can actually do the distillation. So it requires to run, that's what, 4 per bucket. So it requires to run the distillation tower 40, so it requires this centrifuge recipe 40 times. So we need 40 buckets of raw ore slurry. raw ore slurry comes, you get 250 millibuckets from electrolyzing rare ore residue. So we have to run this recipe 160 times. Uh, well, no, actually, yeah, 160 times because you need 4 buckets of you need 1 bucket of raw ore slurry to do the actual recipe. So you need to run this 4 times. So it's 4 times 40, which is 160. However, we do get a little bit of raw ore slurry as well from. We get rare ore residue and raw ore slurry from the void extractor. 400 millibuckets of rare ore residue and 600 millibuckets of raw ore slurry. So we get a little bit of that stuff. So we get it's hard to say how long it would take for a void extractor to produce, 3 ilmenite or, and like 3 bauxite and 2 ilmenite. But it's a long ass time, especially since we're running this at MV. So we only get this every 16 seconds. So like I said, I'm still not sure if I'm gonna just overclock this or just pump out like 4 or 5 more of these things and just run them pretty quickly. Just run a bunch of them. Um, I really was hoping that I'd have more overnight, and then running it overnight would get me more. Unfortunately, that is obviously not the case. There's just a lot of other ore to process. The one downside of trying to get more of that metal ore mixture stuff is that we do get a bunch of other ores that I kind of want to process just because I want to keep them out of the drive and just keep them, moving. The downside of having a large backlog means I'm going to have a large backlog to chew through later. Um, but so we were processing a bunch of pentlandite. We processed about 9,000, it looks like. Now it's processing something else. It looks like it's processing realgar. Yeah, it's processing realgar now. I probably should just take a bunch of these other items out of this extended interface that I don't really, really need to process, just so it'll do, the ilmenite and bauxite that I want it to do. So that's probably something that I want to do. I guess we can go ahead and do that now. Molybdenite we want to keep. Magnesite we want to keep. Pentlandite we don't need to. Tantalite we want to keep. Just because tantalite gives us tantalum, which we can actually use. Tantalum will be very, very useful. Once we have tantalum dust, we can blast that or smelt that into ingots, which we can then use to make both fine wires and foil. And that's like the best recipe for a bunch of SMD components. Like I think like SMD. We can actually make SMD diodes now too. Actually, I need to do this. Um, we have fine platinum wire. We have platinum now from Sheldonite. Yes, transistors require fine tantalum wire to make 32. I believe capacitors can use tantalum. Yes. For the best recipe is PVC and tantalum foils, which gives us 24. I don't know if there's anything else. Oh, yes, inductors as well can use tantalum wire for 32 as well. So I think it's worth processing tantalum just for cheaper SMDs. So it'll be nice. Um, but yeah, so ore processing is in a bare bones state as well. It's all right. One thing I'm using the big multi blocks here, or not the big multi blocks, but like the EV tier multi blocks instead of the IV tier multi blocks. Just because they have perfect overclocks, so they're way faster, way faster. For the lower tier recipes, so it's totally worth it. I don't know when I'm gonna upgrade to the IV multi blocks. Probably pretty quickly. Which means I'm gonna have a bunch of these other, EV tier multi blocks left behind. I don't know if you can grind them down like a large centrifuge. Can I grind this down? No, I can't. So these things, once they're not useful anymore, they're just gonna sit in the AE drives for a while. Um, so it's possible I might just use these for a while. Especially if I build enough of them where I won't need the IV tier multi blocks, but I don't know. That's a problem to solve later until it's done. So that does mean I have to balance how many of these things I build versus making my way towards IV because let's be real, we're not too far away from like the IV tier multi-block. Like let's take a look at the electrolyzer, I guess, right? The large electrolysis chamber requires black steel, which we have. Platinum, we have platinum ingots. We can make that. Silicon rubber and PVC, we have all that stuff. Here you are. The big thing here will be the elite electrolyzer in terms, which requires osmium wire and laminated glass, as well as the IV machine hull, which means I'm gonna need tungsten steel. Tungsten steel, I believe, is really we'll need nichrome coils for that. But tungsten steel dust requires an EV mixer, tungsten, which means I need to do some tungsten processing. So basically, in order to get this stuff, I need to do tungsten processing and platline for osmium. Um, that itself is not too bad. I believe HSLA casing, or it's non-conductive casing. We use this for electrolytic cells that requires IV circuits. What we can do, the non-conductive casing itself requires HSLA, which we can actually do, I believe. This requires HSLA steel dust, which is an HV mixture with titanium, vanadium, Invar, and molybdenum. Um, Titanium would be a little bit of expensive, but we could do it. We have pretty much everything here. So we're not really all that far away from some of these multi-blocks. That's just the electrolyzer though. For something like watertight casing, I believe we can do this dust. This is an RTM alloy coil, which would require platline again. Uh, yeah. So actually, I don't. No, I believe this is an ABS only recipe. Yeah. Still RTM alloy coils. Molybdenum, sulfur, aluminum, iron, nickel, all that stuff we can do. Helium we have as well. The alloy blast furnace is tantalum carbide and EV circuits. We would need the high temperature smelting casings, which requires high temperature alloy casings, which requires more titanium carbide and HSLA steel and tungsten carbide. So this isn't really that bad either. I think we'd also need the heat vents, but I think those are a bit more expensive. The heat vents are titanium rotors, molybdenum disilide, which is, I assume this has to be EBF-able. Yes, which is just silicon and molybdenum, so we can do that as well. So we're not really all that far away from being able to set up these IV tier multi-blocks. Basically, we have to do platline and then tungsten processing. And that's it. And then I can actually start, working towards a bunch of these IV multi-blocks. So I don't really want to build too many of these EV tier multi-blocks for ore processing. So, but that does mean that ore processing is going to be pretty slow up until that point. Which eventually, which does come back around to the I can't make too many void extractors, because if I make too many and I start being faster than ore processing, uh, that's the whole thing will clog up. Like, the thing that worked about Monty Factory is we only ever did micro miners or mining, and for micro miners, we didn't really run them for ores in most cases. We usually used like large miners or the elite miners or whatever, which meant that we got a lot of ores really quickly, which meant that having AE drive buffers was fine if ore processing really wasn't all that fast, because even if we beat the speed of ore processing with our large miners, eventually they would run out of ore, they'd stop, but the ore processing wouldn't. It would just keep going and keep going and keep going. We did actually fill up buffers once or twice during Monty Factory run, but it was easily solvable by just stuffing a bunch of more drives in there. The problem with, StarTech in this case is that the ore production is passive entirely, so I have to always be faster than how fast I produce ores. I also, means I do need bulk drives for that, because I'll never stop producing ores unless I like level emit a bunch of stuff. So it's possible we get into a situation where ore processing is too slow, everything clogs up and locks up, and then I have to clean out a bunch of stuff, and that would be a huge pain in the ass. So I'm kind of limited uh, how fast ore processing can be by IV tier. Once I hit IV tier, I can just kind of let ore processing or ore production do everything that all at once. That's one reason why it's so bare bones as well, is just the wide variety of things that it would produce. Like gravel, the sieves would produce an absolute monstrous amount of resources, as we saw. That was with just the basic ore factories too. Um, it wasn't even like particularly well done. It was really slow, and it still produced absolutely giga amounts of resources. 330,000 iron dust, 230,000 or 220,000 tin dust, 200,000 copper, 120,000 gold, 110,000 sulfur. Right, so a monstrous amount of resources, um, that would be hard for us to store at this stage. So I've been kind of holding back on progression for way too long at this stage. I've been really trying to get ore processing in a good state for things like titanium. Unfortunately, titanium is held back just by IV, right? So it's this chicken and the egg cycle of how do I get more ore processing? I need to progress, but how do I progress? I need more ore processing. And I think the idea is I just have to let this be slow and just accept that it's going to be slow. Um, I also might be able to, focus on some things, maybe throw up a few more void extractors and just not process certain resources and just accept that I'm going to have a huge backlog to process through later, or start voiding certain things that it does produce that I just don't want to process at this stage, so it specifically doesn't fill up my drives and I can only process the things I want. That's also probably what I'm going to have to do. Um, but because just this titanium rate is just too slow. It's just so slow. Um, there are solutions that I'm gonna have to work up. There's gonna be some low-hanging fruit that I can focus on, so that'll be nice. So that's gonna have to happen soon. And once I set that up, then I can start working towards IV. Tungsten processing really won't be all that bad. I'll just have to make some IV stuff over here. I love these train conveyors. Sorry for the side, but I love these train conveyors. They're so cool. Just look how cool it is, like the animation. Yeah, you just like hang in from a chain with a wrench. Um, yeah, so tungsten processing itself won't be too bad, and that can be done in ore processing. As for platline, like actual platline, that's gonna be done somewhere else, I believe. Osmium, I believe, only comes from platline. I don't think there's any other way of making osmiridium or osmium. I think there was a way to get osmium in Moni Factory with some weird ores, but osmium tetroxide. This comes from just distilling acidic osmium solution, which comes from rarest metal mixture and hydrochloric acid. This just comes from platinum group sludge and aqua regia, which is nitric acid and hydrochloric acid. So, Platline is gonna have to happen. Um, this will be like the big thing, like the biggest thing in the near future, I think. So I think the order of operations is tungsten processing, Platline. Um, that'll be. I guess we'll go ahead and write that down. Tungsten processing. I don't really check my to-do list very much, which I should do more. I've just been focusing on setting up ore processing too much, and I just need to stop trying to perfect it at this stage. I've been letting perfect be the enemy of good, which is really bad. On the upside of working so long in ore processing, I have really good control infrastructure over here that'll be very easily swapped out for the good multi-blocks. So this will go from 0 to 100 in an instant almost. I do have a bajillion cables down here. The reason why I have so like these long cable lines is I was really afraid of the wireless connector power draw, and in the end, it's really not that much. It's like an amp of MV or something, even for like as far as it's gonna go. So all these cables are gonna get ripped out, and I'll use them elsewhere in the base because I absolutely will at some stage. Um, but yeah, so that's gonna have to be something that's gonna be done as well. But it's like it works well enough. So I just need to leave this alone. I just need to stop touching this area and just go work on something else. But man, I love ore processing. Ore processing is my favorite modded Minecraft mechanic. It's probably the one reason why I like GregTech is specifically because of how ore processing works in GregTech and how many decisions you have to make and how complex it is. Like for a while, I really loved Mekanism ore processing, but I've done that 47 times. I swear to God. So it's really all not that interesting to me anymore. But GregTech ore processing is. So I love this stuff, but I do just have to let it go and come back and do something else. At the very least, our early game ore processing is a million times better than it was in Moni Factory, and I hated our early game ore processing. Our early game ore processing in Moni Factory was a terrible. Um, it was just like it was like 4 HV machines like chained together with like lasers and stuff, and it took like 2 days to do anything. It was awful. I went from awful ore processing straight to IV, like you know nice control infrastructure and stuff, and it was terrible. But now it's less terrible, but it's still not great. But problems for another day. I'm pretty sure that's everything, and oh my god, I swear this is like a 45-minute video. Um, so that's interesting. Ah man, chain conveyors. But yeah, I think that's probably about everything I've got for this week. Next week will not nearly be so much stuff as I have to actually start writing again. Book 2 needs to happen for Eshkatan. Book 1 is done. My break was nice, but there's work to be done. So, because I did play nothing but Minecraft for pretty much like a week and a half at this stage. um, it was a well-deserved break, I think. Writing a 100,000-word novel in 5 months is not an easy feat. It's actually quite difficult and caused injury to me, considering I gave myself repetitive stress injury. I actually I turned in I returned my Kinesis Advantage 2 keyboard. Um, it just wasn't really what I needed. I do play other games, and I don't really want to have to swap between the KA2 and my HyperX. It was something I could have done, but I just wanted like a single keyboard for everything. So instead, I ordered the Iris Standard Edition from Keeb. I'll take a look at that. That's a true split board. It actually comes in two separate pieces that you can like move around on your desk, and it looks super cool. And they had like a little PDF printout, and I liked the way it fit on my desk. So I think that'll be fun. We'll have to take a look how that goes. They have a 90-day return thing, so if I don't like it, I can always return it. But I think I like it. It's also just like a million times smaller than the KA2. The KA2 was fucking massive. And what's really funny too is the Kinesis Advantage 2. I always called it at first like a keyboard from 2005, but from an alternate universe that was really obsessed with ergonomics. It turns out the Kinesis Advantage 2 is identical in design to the original Kinesis Advantage. It just uses new hardware and firmware. The original Kinesis Advantage 2 was made in like 1991 or something. 1990, like the 1990s. So it literally is like a 30-year-old design or whatever. Which was like mind blowing. I'm like, oh my god, no wonder it feels dated because it is. Um, but yeah, so return to that. My next ergonomic keyboard should be coming next week, which will be nice. So hopefully I'll have some updates for you on that um, next week. But yeah, so the base is coming along. There's still lots of decorative work to be done, but you know, there's lots of progression work to be done, and that's far more important. Um, so I hope you guys have had a good week. My week has been pretty good. I'm actually having a really good day today specifically as well. I'm very happy with all that stuff. So hope you guys have a good upcoming week, and I will see you all again next week.